So Dave Crabill and I met Dave a couple of years ago, and
I've met Matt. I've been on the show a couple of times.
yeah. Right. Yep. And then what I was going to say is, or what I will say is that I work with him. He's with the iHemp. He's the president of the Michigan iHemp group, which is the industrial hemp group. That's the folks that make hemp that for building materials and rope and canvas and you name it.
Fabric for clothing and
we were talking about too, that. I mean, the Army is looking into hemp clothing because, as Dave points out, that if you get wounded with a cotton shirt, the cotton will infect your wound, whereas the hemp won't, right?
It's naturally antibiotical.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's something I didn't know.
Yep.
I only know that Woody Harrelson's been talking about hemp clothing for about 1 million years now. But I didn't know it had that property too.
I think during World War II, the uniforms were made out of hemp, weren't they? If I recall.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I'm not that old, but I remember you talking about it, and I looked it up. Anyway, so we got Dave on the show because I'm one of the moderators on the show as well as Dave and Blaine Bechtel to run the show, and I come from the dark side of the plant. I have one of my websites that covers cannabis, and so I bring a different perspective. Same plant, just different THC levels. And
close to zero.
With hemp, there's hardly any THC, which is the active ingredient that gives you the buzz. And of course, with cannabis, that's what you're going for. But we've been doing the show, 2 years now, Dave?
At least, yeah.
At least, yeah, it's harder. And so we were just
like 10.
Yes, I was just in a briefing session a couple of weeks ago where we're talking about the new format, and I don't know where you've left it, but why don't you talk a little bit about what you'd like to do in the new format moving forward?
Now on the
or is it finalized yet, or is it still being kicked?
Yeah, no, it's finalized. We implemented last week. Is this part of the interview, or is this?
Yeah. This is we're live, so this is part of the interview.
This is live. So okay, thank you. Yeah, I actually have some really cool news to share too, but we can talk about this a little bit. This is cool. Technology is useful as long as it works, right? Mm-hmm. We started using StreamYard, and what I like about StreamYard is we can provide more value to our sponsors. So we can do scrolls and banner displays on the screen as we go. The other thing we're doing is within that program, you have all the social media chats and a live chat function, so it can be more interactive. And we're breaking the format up into segments. That's the part we're still working on trying to implement. So and Mike's been coaching us on that, on how you do this, breaking things into segments. So it's been a learning curve. We jumped into the whole Zoom thing just out of necessity, and we need to evolve after 100 shows. We have over 100 shows under our belt, Mike.
Isn't that many? No kidding. Wow. I didn't realize. So we're looking at StreamYard as well. The Zoom is simple to use, but it was never meant to be used as a broadcast studio, as it were. It's a video conferencing software. So we're looking at StreamYard as well for those very same reasons. My business partner is Dan Keelan, and for the 420 Post, that's what we call the marijuana show that I do on Wednesdays. We're looking seriously at that, experiment with it there. If it works out, then move it into this particular show as well. Our friends at Rick Thompson and Jamie Lowell use that on their show, Jazz Cabbage Cafe, and I've watched it several times. And it looks more like MSNBC or CNN or along those lines. So, yeah, that's a good thing.
They use StreamYard also?
They use StreamYard. Wow. They've been using it now for 6 months or so, I think.
Okay.
So check with Rick Thompson on that too. But let's talk a little bit about, again, there's a lot of and even within the hemp community, there's a lot of confusion. The thing that, like I said in the beginning, which really separates cannabis from hemp is they're the same plant, but except for smokable flower and CBD products, they're really not going for any kind of THC level in hemp because it's, gosh, the 20,000 products. I sound like I'm a cheerleader here for Dave, but I mean, it's really true. There's just so many things out there. But there's it was made legal in the Farm Act of what, 2018, I believe, wasn't it?
2018 U.S. Farm Bill, right?
Yeah, right. And so it's still a very nascent industry. One of the big bugaboos that I've learned, I am not a farmer, but having been on the show for 2 years, I definitely don't want to be a farmer. Way too much work for me. And talk about risky with hemp. If you grow that and it gets above 0.31% THC, give or take,
0.3, yeah, just 0.3.
0.3, you have to destroy the crop. So you're spending $20,000 or so an acre. And if somehow, I mean, that's very small margin of error. So it's very risky business. And the other thing is, as I discovered, and again, I'm not a farmer, farmers don't typically grow a crop unless they have a contract at the end to buy the crop. And that's one of the big bugaboos is we don't really have, some people in the auto industry are experimenting with it. I know Ford is, and I know some of the higher end Porsche and Audi and a few of the high end folks are experimenting with it to use, instead of plastic composites, it would be hemp composite. But other than that, there isn't a big demand for it right now, right, Dave? Am I getting that wrong?
It's coming. You know what? It's interesting. You know, I grew an acre in 2019, and I have about 5 liters of this CBD distillate still from that 2019 grow that I use, and you know that's what you use to make the CBD products, the tinctures and the salves. But the market was overwhelmed with the number of people growing in 2019, and then we had the pandemic. The market's now rebounding, and we're starting to see demand come back. The issue with the fiber and the grain is processing, so we don't have that investment in the infrastructure yet to do that at scale. But it is happening. I have some news to share. There's a house in Chelsea, Michigan that was just built with hemp, right in your neighborhood, Mike.
And the nice thing about hemp is, I wouldn't say it's fireproof, but you would have to have a heck of a fire to set it on fire, right?
Yeah, they actually did with Hempcrete. They did. That's one of the things is getting the certification. There's ATSM, and there's 2 certifying bodies, one to say what it is and one to say how it's used. And fire rating is one of those tests, and it scored a 0 out of 40. So it was not flammable at all.
Wow!
You put a blowtorch, right? It's
so
really,
what specifically? What part of the house was made with hemp? Was it the concrete? Was it structural members? What was it?
Yeah, so it's hemp has some really good water, moisture handling capabilities when you put it in with limestone. So basically it's an insulation. So you would do a standard construction or post and beam construction, and then fill the walls with the hemp and lime mixture. And a lot of times they'll mix some natural clay into it. It becomes a stone wall, and you don't paint it with a latex or anything like that that's going to seal that barrier. You use a lime mortar over the outside of that structure, and the longer time goes on, the harder that building becomes. I have some pictures here I could show you.
Yeah, let me put share on here.
Yeah, please,
Hang on one second.
Please do. So it winds up looking a bit like a stucco house or something like that.
Sort of.
Yes.
Go ahead, Dave. You can share now.
Yeah, well, I was on Instagram. I'm going to pull up a better picture before.
No, let me get.
There's 3 houses
here so I can see it.
Well, one of the issues though with when you're doing it is it does take time to dry. So
yeah, it takes like 12 weeks. So there's some companies making blocks, and there's companies making panels.
That's what I'm saying is you can buy it pre-dried, I guess the word I'm going for, rather than you put it up and you wait for it to dry, right? So
yeah, I would say this was likely done on site. You see these variations in here?
Yeah.
When we did a dog house at Grow Green in Whitmore Lake, Michigan, we had a workshop, and we tried different mixes and such. And it was interesting how, depending on little variations in the mix, you get these little variations. But this is before it's you would put a plaster lime coating over that, or you could do other things over it, but you want to maintain that water permeability.
And the R ratings are off the scale, right? I mean, in terms of
it's good.
Now we're
I wouldn't
talking.
say
There's
off
a
the
there's a house
scale.
for an old fart like me because it's all on one level. So
yeah, that's actually the one when you retire to Traverse City that we're going to
there you
recommend
go.
that you do. So
it does kind of have a Frank Lloyd Wright prairie house look to it, that long and low thing.
So there's that first house we saw. Here's and here's a close up.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So it's
really
tamped.
interesting.
In a lot of cases, there's the one in Chelsea was blown in. This might have been tamped. I'm not sure, but you basically fill that cavity and let it cure. So you can see how thick that wall is there.
Oh yeah, that's going to be insulated like a thermos bottle, I'm sure, if you have good windows.
I want to say, I don't have that number, don't hold me to this, but I want to say like 3.5 per inch, 3 to 4 R value per inch. So if you do 8 inches, you're at 24 R value.
Yeah, that's reasonable, more than reasonable.
So here's the one in Chelsea.
Okay, a barn house.
And we had Kim Coase on the iHemp Hour with us, Michael. I think you might have been on that one, but more of a barn style house.
oh, right, yeah, I remember that.
So it's and this company is out of Pennsylvania. This Cameron McIntosh, Amerisharn. I'm pronouncing that wrong, but yeah. So it's exciting that there's things happening. We're actually building with it. And there is a fiber grow in just north of Ludington. And where's it at? It'll say here somewhere. I forget, but they're in the north, the west side of the state. They're growing some fiber, and they have a field day set up for August 23rd. So it's coming up pretty quick. So it's exciting. There is some growing. We don't have as much growing. We've gone from, the first year we had nearly 700 growers, and we have probably maybe 50 people growing hemp.
Oh, I'll tell them the reason why too.
Well, a lot of it has to do with the market and the lack of processing for the fiber and the grain that the farmers are most interested in doing. When you're growing for CBD, it's almost like a marijuana grow. That you're focusing on the cannabinoids. When you're growing for fiber and grain, you have to have that processing ability. And the cost to get a license to grow went from $100 to $1,350 because it has to be, and then there's a lot of testing involved. So unless you're going to make thousands of dollars, you're not going to spend that money, so that's an impediment to entry. We're not getting the quarter-acre test grows to see which genetic is going to grow best here in Michigan. Unfortunately, that's been kiboshed. There's very little of that happening.
Well, but the reason being is the Department of Ag wanted to make sure the licenses covered the cost of administering, so it was revenue neutral or something along those lines, right?
Yeah, all of the any expenses associated with growing hemp have to be self-funded, basically. Where other commodity crops, they actually have incentives and money and grants and dollars, and so it's a whole different situation.
And that varies state to state. Pennsylvania is very receptive, and some states don't charge anything for the licenses and are providing a lot of incentives to grow hemp. But for some reason, Michigan, not so much. So,
yeah,
so can you tell me how many acres do we have under cultivation now in Michigan? Do we know? Do we have a reasonable guess?
A couple thousand, I think, right?
Yeah, well, it might be 10,000 acres, but I think that might be a stretch. Where we really, with the fiber and grain industry going, there's a lot. It's going to be years, but we're going to have tens of thousands of acres growing because The grain is the seed of the plant, and it's a superfood. It's 30% protein, high in amino acids, a perfect ratio of 369 amino acids. It's really healthy. So we start feeding that to livestock. That's going to be a big reason to grow the hemp grain, and people will be able to do a dual crop potentially, where they grow the grain stalks, and that's basically the top of the plant. Just take the top of the plant, that's your grain, and then cut the stalks, let it rot in the field, and then process that for the fiber.
Right. Well, what I hear, when I hear people say, "Oh, you can use hemp in thousands of products." Well, what I always hear from like venture capitalists and private equity people is, when you have a new product or when you have a new service, you want to pick, one or two or maybe three markets and be really good at those and service those first before you do anything else. So what do you think are the top 2 or 3 applications of this that we're going to see first? The top 2 or 3 markets?
Yeah,
animal feed sounds like maybe one.
Well, the CBD's certainly still going to be number one. It's not the $24 billion market that we had anticipated. We're about $5 billion, but because we already have the processing in place. Beyond CBD, hemp, the hempcrete or hemp lime, for building, like I was showing you that home, that's going to be a good market because there's less entry as far as the processing. The hemp grain for hemp seed oil, there's a lot of different food, and that's considered grass. We can eat it and consume it. We just can't feed it to our chickens and then eat it for whatever reason that is. But so those would be the top markets. It's going to be, we don't really see textiles on the radar at all yet because of the expense of the processing to get that set up. So that'd be an interesting project as someone to set up as a little craft operation. It would be really interesting to see. I think it could do well, but
all right. We're going to have to leave it at that, Mr. Crabill. So I know you got everybody all lathered up. They want to find out, how do we reach out to those folks at the iHemp Association?
Go to iHempMichigan.com. Give me a call, send us an email. We'd be glad to speak with you.